Yes.
So this is for the 6th grade art class from Greenwood in Midland, Texas. Is that where you went to school?
That's where in Midland, not this specific school,
okay.
not Greenwood, but like Midland. Yeah, but
Okay.
Midland's Midland. So yeah, it's my hometown.
And Melissa Rowland, probably Ms. Rowland,
Cool.
is the teacher.
Cool.
Here are some of the questions that the students, reoccurring themes of questions from the students. First one that we have is, what is your favorite work of art that you have done in the past? Why is it your favorite?
Buddy, I'm doing an interview right now, and you didn't bring the cap close enough for me to get it. Sorry, in a little bit. Cheeto wants to play fetch. Okay, so, favorite work of art. Well, a work of art can be a painting, but it's not limited to a painting. So, favorite painting, I don't think I really think about the paintings that way as far as like having favorites. And outside of that, I think the most meaningful works of art up to this point have been and are my relationships with people. My relationship with you, so my relationship with my partner Lauren, my cats, my friends, my community, myself, my family. Yeah, that's been that's really important to me. So I'd probably say that. Relationships.
Cool. All right. The next question is, did you create art when you were a kid?
Yes, I did. I would draw, I would write and come up with different characters, different stories. I'd draw buildings that I thought would be awesome. Yes, I did create art. I've created my art my whole life.
Who inspired you to start making art?
I think nature and imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the next question is, was it hard to quit playing football?
No. It did take effort and intentionality to unlearn some of the habits of mine that football gave me in the way that I had learned them, and learn how to apply those in other ways that were more enjoyable for me individually and less hurtful to other people.
And then this question kind of similar.
An example of that, I do want to give an example. Yeah, so sorry.
Yeah.
An example of that last thing that I said is a sense of competition not based in the art of understanding through actually being like playfully active, where as an athlete, it's like you are aggressively competitive, and I don't think that is a healthy mindset to navigate the world with, or to experience life through.
Yeah. I guess that leads well into the next question, which is, was the transformation from football to art difficult?
No. Art was something that it was always, I had done it, and it was always there. And I think growing into not having to feel like I need to prove to anyone that I am an artist, even myself, or feel like that's a title that I would use to even necessarily give definition to what I do or who I am. That process for sure required me participating with it intimately and with a consistency day to day. And I think what that over the last decade, over time, as that happens, like, I think when you do hit the point of like transformation, I mean, that's effortless. It's at least in my experience up to this point in life, it's been one of these things that like something will happen in life that, brings up maybe a season of life where I'm like reflective of past seasons in life, and in looking at that, I'm like, wow, I'm not only not it's not even, I wouldn't even describe it as wow, I've grown. It's like, wow, I'm nothing like that anymore. And like, while all that stuff is happening, it's not like I'm actively being like, oh man, I'm transforming. That feels like you're open to being uncomfortable and learning to have a optimistic, hopeful, resilient, patient, also urgent attitude towards growing and being uncomfortable. And then as time passes, you look back, you're like, wow, like completely different. And I think that mentality and that perspective of being open to experiencing life is something that, while you can be like, wow, I'm totally different, identifying with that perspective becomes like almost like a unintended framework of identity, where you're like, wow, I'm totally different, but completely the same. And so I guess to circle around and pack that thought up, there's times where life creates an uncomfortable season And in that, it's important to be honest about all the ways that that makes you feel, while not becoming disheartened about how you feel about yourself or life. And then there's times where you yourself make seasons of life uncomfortable. And there's a process of learning to not be the cause of an uncomfortability that is unnecessary. While also having a faith that is rooted in the desire to grow for the purposes of having the ability to be more nourishing to other people, not just yourself, but also yourself, and accept the challenges you give yourself and be committed to them, even though they could make you incredibly uncomfortable.
Next question is, why do you use the image of an eye in a lot of your artwork?
I could tell different stories about different seasons of life where the meaning has been different over the course of being an artist. And in each season, it's been, I guess, a little bit different. But I think in this season that I'm in now, speaking from this point, looking forward, like, I'm not sure what that means in this season, really. And I think that's an interesting use of symbols for an artist. So there's using symbols to inform an audience, and then there's also using symbols as a reference point personally, for yourself as an artist, to see how you think and feel and relate to those over the course of, as time passes and life happens as you're making art, and being open to the meaning of those also changing. Yeah.
Okay. How do you decide what images you will create? For example, do you start off with an animal you want to create, or do you just start creating and see what emerges?
It can happen both ways. Yeah, that can happen both ways. From my experience up to this point, I've learned that so if I have an idea of just the subject matter that I'm wanting to use and execute before I do it, the expression of art is much more about the process than it is what's being made. If it's me just seeing what emerges, the process is much less about the process and much more about the exploration of what is going to, that is like a process in its own way of like not being a process, of just being open to listening to where a painting wants to go, and at any moment, like what the experience itself feels like. Yeah, so both are ways to go about it. Excuse me.
What projects are you currently working on?
Always my favorite works of art, my relationships. Yeah. Relationships are one of the most influencing and worthwhile parts of life. Yeah.
Who are your favorite artists?
Well, right now in this season of life, a fellow artist, her name's Lauren, which is you.
Oh,
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah, totally.
How do you know where to hide your artworks, and how do you do it in secret?
Well, it's a community collaboration. I have people that help do them. When I do them, I have times and places that usually there's no one there, and it's really not planned out too much. I mean, I think that what the feedback that I've gotten from people who help do them, very much so, is that it's an exploration and a seeing of what happens as they go out on that adventure. But also, like, as you're driving around or on, like, you're just on the move, you see places and it's like, oh man, that could be interesting. And then also part of it is maybe not trying to be so secretive about it, but just being like, all right, I'm going to go and do this. And sometimes like people recognize that it's happening as it's actually happening, and are like, yo, is that what I think it is? And it is. So I don't think there's really like too much of a process behind that, really.
What would be your dream project?
It's a great thing to be intentional about thinking about consistently, and I do. And at one point, all of this was that. But at no point can what that actually is be the thing you could point at, or I feel like should even come up with in any other way other than not reaching for anything but listening to what may be there to see or not there to see, but just being available to really be like, to not be so quick to think you know what you'd want, or have it be something that you'd feel like it's something that you want as much as it's like you would love to see it be realized. So while there's a bunch of different ways that it could look like, I think that may also be kind of the same thing, which is practicing seeing the ways that the world and society and civilization is, and using that as a reference point to imagine new possibilities and realities for all the incredible things that can happen, while seeing the ways that those incredible things are happening, aligning yourself with supporting those things that are happening, and also still looking at like what can happen, not just seeing the result of what is caused by the ways you would like the world not to be. This right now is it happening. Is like being able to have a class of young artists that are like, yo, we're like, we have questions, like, dude, this is that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, so I couldn't describe, I don't know if I have a dream project. I mean, I think that there's definitely work that feels like it's a dream that I get to work on. And it can be like that. Like, that's the thing. It can totally be like that. It can be, and like, why not choose to experience life that way? Being stoked about what you get to work on, what that does, who you get to work with, how they are, like that, you know, it's just, I think it's really easy to confuse the idea of freedom in a way that it becomes limiting and entrapping. It's not just being able to do what you want to do whenever you want to do it, however you want to do it. How, you know, it's just like, it's so not that. And any awesome dream or a goal worth having is much more worth sharing, and much more than that worth asking help for. like, yo, can you help with this? Like, like, hey, it can't just be like, this is this thing I want, and this thing I'm doing, and this thing that it's, when I get it, it's like, that's just such a small thing.
How many artworks do you usually create in a year?
I don't know anymore. Yeah. Yeah. I don't. I'm not sure. I don't know.
And the last question is, how do you think your artwork affects other people?
What was that? A boss or something? Differently. Yeah. Well, I appreciate all the questions. It's a great time to be a young artist. It's a great time to be a young artist. What else to say? At no point in time do you get to a point where you're doing it more or less than any other point that you may be doing it. If you're doing it, you're doing it. So it's not about if you're good or bad at doing it. Unless you're not doing it, and you can feel good or bad about that. That's not a lot to unpack, but it's also not a little. And some of these things that you're like, man, that makes a lot of sense. But you're like, man, I don't know how, but it's also kind of confusing. Unpack them over a lifetime. Yeah.